Jeffrey, going back to before you were a Hollywood screenwriter, what made you think you could tell stories on a Hollywood level? What gave you that confidence or that feeling, that intuition that, you know what, this is something I think I can do?
I think it's the ignorance of the young. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine once, it was probably a couple years ago when I was home, and she said when I was like 8 or 9, she asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be a movie star. So I kind of always knew I wanted to work in film. I was, growing up, thought I wanted to be an actor. And I went to New York to study acting actually at the beginning of my career, and that didn't pan out really because non-traditional casting wasn't a thing back in the early 90s. And they canceled the Cosby Show, so then non-traditional casting, that was like your only place. So then English was my second favorite subject, and I'd been writing, from the time I was young. I just always would write stories, and my English teachers kind of my biggest inspirations as far as school goes. So I was like, well, I'll just write stuff to be in. So that's kind of why I segued into writing. But you just, when you're younger, you don't think of, Hollywood does seem like this faraway magical place in a way, but you also are very naive about how the movie business is. So you think, oh, you write something and somebody likes it, and then they go out and pick up a camera and they make it, and then it comes out in the theater. And that's kind of, when you're younger, that's kind of all you could think about. You don't know the whole like convoluted, twisted process of screenwriting and, getting something from page to screen when you're young. So you're kind of in that magical like illusion land where you can say, I can do it, So yeah, again, the writing wasn't my first goal, but working in movies has always been pretty much just what I've wanted to do my whole life. So that's kind of my only career game plan.
Right. How small was the town that you grew up in?
We had I think 100 students in our graduating class. I almost feel like I should Google that. I should know that. It was a very small town. It was a 40-minute bus ride to get to school every day.
Oh, wow.
So we were like the last stop out in the hills. So it was Eastern Kentucky. So it was a very small town. They didn't have a theater program. Like my English teacher, when I was a sophomore, I talked her into creating a theater program for like once the one year, and then it kind of died out after that year. But yeah, I was pretty determined. It's very interesting when you're young and you're driven, because that's one of the things you try to tell people to hold on to, because as you get a little older, that the drive doesn't necessarily go away, but the realities of the business and the distractions can kind of get in your way. So when you're young, you just have that boundless like energy and faith and optimism, and you try to hold on to that magic, even when you start getting into the business side of things.
Right, because as you get older, you kind of talk yourself out of it, knowing all the things that can go wrong.
Right.
And it's almost a shame. I mean, there's like this protective part that is there for that reason, but then talks you out of it.
And it's, nobody encourages a career in the arts. Like if you tell anybody when you're young you want to be an actor or a writer, they're always saying, well, that's great. What are you going to do for a real job? Like that's pretty much the reaction. My mom did not know that I majored in theater in college till after I was in college. Like I told her I was majoring in math, and she got so mad when she found out I majored in theater, because she's like, you're never going to be able to make a living doing that. And so there is a reality, but for me, like again, I just never had a backup plan. So luckily I was good in English, and writing was another passion of mine. So I found a way to stay in the business, and not give up when the acting didn't kind of pan out as soon as I had hoped it would. So, but yeah, people will usually tell anybody who says they want to be in the film business or any kind of art, they're like, oh, that'll be a good hobby, but what are you going to do for a real job? And so that's kind of just part of our society. We don't really value, I think, in this country, I think in other countries, they do value the arts more than we do here, but usually arts programs are the first things that get cut in schools. It's like sports, number one, then science and math and stuff, and then the arts are usually kind of down here as far as priorities go, which is interesting, because I think the arts are probably one of the more helpful, just to help you as a human being to kind of grow and like expand your horizons, open your mind, and just also get in touch with your emotions. A lot of stuff that a lot of the other fields don't really emphasize or help you do. I think the arts, that's why a lot of people love the arts, but it is that's something I think we have to start valuing a lot more in our country.
It's funny you mentioned sports, because I think I heard you say in another interview, and I laughed out loud when I heard it, that people that are into horror probably weren't people that were playing sports.
Yeah, yeah.
And they weren't the cheerleaders and they weren't the jocks.
Yeah,
and I thought that was great, because it's true, you develop this interesting imagination that when you're in that sort of herd mentality, trying to be popular, all that probably isn't going through your mind. So maybe you can talk about that.
And there's a lot too. I mean, you know, if you're an athlete too, like that's your whole life. Like you're always practicing. You're always, you know, when you're not at school practicing, you're practicing at home. You're watching what you eat. You're working out. So that's your whole life. So you don't. Yeah, I think you know, most of the people that I know who are artists, you know, they spend most of their time at home, like, you know, watching movies or reading comic books or, you know, doing kind of nerdy, geeky things, like just, you know, really playing in their imagination or with their imagination. And I think that's a kind of a common thing you'll find with artists. Is, you know, a lot of artists will, you know, didn't have like a big clique that they hung out with, or weren't really, you know, super popular, and some of them were. But again, it is, you know, especially in high school, it's because I know it's like school's like a machine. You know, you have so many people. It's very important, obviously, getting an education, but you have so many kids going through every year that you don't have time to, like, everybody's got their own individual personality, and you can't really get to know people. So you gotta have to shove them in boxes to, like, you know, just to process people. It's a weird thing that I've noticed as we grow, because people still try to generalize, you know, in a way. And so that's even when I joke. It's not even joke, but when I talk about, like, you know, the jocks and the cheerleaders aren't the ones that were home watching a lot of horror movies. It's also because they were out practicing and doing their thing. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting how we still kind of keep those boxes as we get older, and you know, I sound a little bit like a hippie right now, but I don't know.
No. I found it. I thought it was funny because I mean, there's a lot of truth to it. So, you know, how many screenplays did you write before Final Destination?
I think about 7.
And these were feature?
Yeah, 7 features of varying degrees, starting from really awful to okay to good. Because I wrote my first one when I was in high school, and I sent it to New Line Cinema to get coverage on it. And they're like, oh, I got great coverage, but it's not right for us. And then when I started working at New Line, like 5 years later, I dug the coverage up, and they were like, this is awful. It was obviously written by a middle schooler, and I was like, I was in high school. So it's interesting, because I always just tell people, like, that's why you can't take rejection when you get it. Because if I'd have seen that coverage when I was in high school, I probably would have just been like, oh, I don't have any talent. I would have given up. But you also have to be open to growing, you know, because I also meet a lot of young people, and, you know, God bless them, you know, but they think that they're already there. They're like, I'm like, this script is the best thing that, you know, Hollywood's ever going to make. And it's like, you're 15. I'm sure that with all due respect, I'm sure that's not the best thing that Hollywood is gonna read. So, you know, you need to kind of let your ego go and realize that you have to grow. So I wrote a lot. I didn't, again, just learning. It's a learning process, but when I was young, it was just a lot of fun, you know, just to write. And then, you know, you start learning structure as you get, you know, older. And then when you start working at a studio, then all of a sudden you start realizing, oh, there's a hard craft to this that you need to kind of learn too. So it's mixing the business with the creative.
And this was a script based loosely on, like, Nightmare on Elm Street?
That was a treatment I wrote when I was 14, mm-hmm. which I wrote, got into, hello cat, see a little visitor here, that I wrote for A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's what got me in touch with New Line Cinema when I was 14. And I stayed in touch with them until I was 19, and I started interning there when I was 19. And so, yeah, they made Final Destination when I was 30, just to date myself. But wow. The first Final Destination originally started off as a spec script to get an agent for an X-Files episode, because they want you to write something, you know, of your own, and they also want you to write something that's already on TV, so that you can write in different characters' voices. So I wrote it as an X-Files episode. And I didn't submit it to the show because one of my friends at New Line said this will make a great feature, and then I worked on it. It ironically ended up with 2 guys who worked on the X-Files, James Wong and Glenn Morgan. So it was kind of I think it was kind of a karmic thing, you know, that's kind of meant to be with the X-Files connection there.
I'm curious though, what is keeping in touch? Was that, like, that's fascinating to me as a 14-year-old. Like, yeah, I'm just going to be keeping in touch with New Line.
Well, no, because I, you know, Bob Shea, at first he didn't read my treatment because it was unsolicited, and then I wrote him kind of a snarky, not snarky, but, you know, kind of a, you know, I was like, hey, I've seen 3 of your movies, and I spent money on you. I think you can take 5 minutes to read my story.
Oh,
and
great,
so,
I love it.
Yeah, so so he did, and got back to me, and then his assistant would, her name was Joy Mann. She's like just an amazing woman. She passed years ago, unfortunately, but just amazing woman. And she would send me like movie posters and like little, merchandising things for the movies, and she would send me scripts to read. So I just would stay in touch with them and send them scripts, and they were always very, very gracious to even spend time with me. And then when I don't know if they ever knew I was actually going to get to New York or not, but I ended up at my college. I was pretty crafty. I should be craftier. I'd make a good supervillain if I use my craftiness for evil. But when I was in college, I had them do a special program where I could go to New York for the summer to study acting at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and then would get credit for it. So the school paid for my whole trip to New York and my whole summer there. But then I got an internship at New Line while I was up there and got an agent. I was like, oh, screw school, and decided to stay in New York and stay at New Line.
So they knew you were 16 or however old you were when you sent the script in the first time?
I think, Joy, I don't know if I ever, I don't know when I told Joy how old I was. I think she asked me once, because I would call her too. I got the phone number from information, so I would just call her, and she would talk to me. It was
That's
so great.
Great.
Yeah,
That's nice.
I mean, and this was back when New Line was, Nightmare had come out, so they were definitely growing, but they hadn't turned into like the powerhouse that they became. But it definitely wouldn't happen today. But it was a real blessing. I mean, I always give credit to Bob and Joy for just, if they hadn't stayed in touch with me and
Right.
inspired me and then brought me on as an intern when I first started, when I went to New York. I mean, I'm sure I still would have been in the business. Like, that's just was my path, I think. But yeah, they were really crucial, and I miss Warner Brothers like absorbed New Line, so it's not the same place anymore. But it was probably one of the best, I think, studios probably to ever be built, because it was so artist friendly, and they really cared about like Bob Shea was a huge film lover. Like, he started distributing like John Waters films out of his apartment to college campuses and doing like these tours. Like, so he's a huge film lover. So he created this company that was full of film lovers. And now you have a lot of great companies, but a lot of them are run by business people who don't love film. So they understand the equations of like, well, if I put this formula together, it'll make money, but they don't understand the creative side of it. And New Line was just a wonderful, like, fostering environment to work. So I got really lucky with that one.
So your first year there as an intern, you were 19?
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was like? I mean, it must have been surreal, because here's this group of people that first they turned you down, but then they keep in touch with you and they send you things, and now you're there.
It was surreal in a way, but it was kind of, it's a weird thing, because just because I always knew I was going to be working in the movie business somehow, like, I wasn't like super, like, it would hit me sometimes, but it hit me when I found that coverage for that first thing I wrote. I was like, wow, if I'd have read this, if they'd have told me the truth, I might not be here. But because it was kind of all happening, and when you're younger, you're still like 19, you're still at that, like, I can do anything in the world and nothing can stop me. And, so I have always been so appreciative of the opportunity, but I wasn't like I was ever surprised. But it was cool. It was really cool, like, because I got to meet all the people from Nightmare on Elm Street, and so meeting all these people that I had grown up idolizing was like cool. And I remember we were at the Seven, New Line did Seven, this amazing movie with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, and we were at the premiere for that, and all of a sudden I'm talking to Morgan Freeman for like an hour, and I'm like, because they teach you when you work there, like, don't act weird around when the celebrities come in, because they would come in all the time for meetings. So you'd learn how to like kind of shut that geeky part off of your brain.
Right.
Sometimes, but then I had lunch with Jane Badler, who was in V, the miniseries that came out in the 80s, who played Diana, the evil, like, lizard alien queen. And that, I had lunch with her, and that was the first time I've actually been starstruck, where I couldn't talk. Like, it was ridiculous, because I never knew what starstruck meant until I had lunch with her, and then I was like, I can't talk right now, and I can't. This is really embarrassing. I'm a grown man, and why am I acting like this? But yeah, it was a wonderful thing, and it was a wonderful convergence of, again, the right people like Bob and Joy, like, taking the time, because even Bob could have just written in that one thing and written me off, and Joy could have been like, oh, that's cute, and but she would stay in touch with me, and I probably just, poor one, I probably bugged the hell out of her. I was always like, can you read this? Can you do? And she was just very patient, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It really was.
So then, if I understand this right, that Final Destination was the first screenplay that you actually sold. Is that right? First one?
That was the first one I sold. I wrote one. It never got made, but I was actually hired to write a sequel for a movie called Pumpkinhead, which is one of my favorites, and they're remaking it now. So hopefully I can use my sequel idea for the sequel for the remake. But I got hired actually before I had an agent. I got hired because Brad Cravoy was a producer, and yeah, he was taking pitch meetings, and I wrote a pitch that he liked, and he basically hired me and another writer to write drafts of the script, and then the company got bought by somebody and all this. So neither one of our scripts ever got made. But no, that was my first paying job as a writer, which was fun. That was a little crazy because you're like, wow, I'm writing something that I grew up loving. So that was the first thing that I actually sold, and I'd written like 5 or 6, 7 scripts before Final Destination that never got so, and rightly so for some of them. When you go back and read them, it's like, whoa, these are pretty bad. But there's a couple of them that still have like nuggets of ideas that I might turn into something someday.
So then, I'm just wondering how did it happen? What were the details? So you're working at New Line. They've known you for years.
They know me for years. You know, I had the TV. I was trying to get a TV agent, and then my friend Mark Kaufman was like, "Oh, this would make a great idea for a feature." So back in the day, you could actually sell a treatment to a studio. You know, you didn't have to write a whole script, and because I worked at the studio, I knew how when the winds would change very frequently, like, so, you know, something would be hot one week and not the next week. So I was like, well, let me write a treatment because it's a great concept. And then some friends of mine worked for a producer outside of the studio that had to deal with the studio. So I'm like, let me work with them and their producer partner and then bring the idea back to the studio, because I knew that would give me a better chance of getting it set up if it was with a producer attached. So I, had the treatment, but then, and it was they were all adults. And then Scream came out, and I love Scream, and Kevin Williamson's a dear friend of mine. But the minute that came out, it's like, well, let's make them all teenagers. So then I had to go through and rewrite the treatment to make them teenagers. And then the studio's like, they just couldn't get their head around death being the killer. They're like, it's cool, but how can you make death a killer? That just doesn't make any sense. I'm like, that's the whole point. Like, it's death. You can't. So the studio just kept passing on it, and finally the producers, it was Warren Zeid and Craig Perry. They were like, well, if you pass on it again, we're going to go to Dimension, which was kind of New Line's rival, Miramax at the time. And so they're like, we'll buy it. After that.
You said the magic words.
So then they bought the treatment, and then they hired me to write the first draft of the script, and then we went out to directors after that. So it was a pretty quick process. I mean, we sold the original story in '97, and the movie came out in 2000. So that's in Hollywood time, that's pretty fast.
So when you did the casting for it, how did you find the lead?
They actually, New Line did all the casting through their casting department. I mean, I'd put a list together of like my dream cast at the time, but I love the cast that we ended up with, and it's funny because I'm friends with Devin. He's directing now, and he's got a new TV show on, and so I produced his first short that he directed, and he's a really talented guy. So we've actually reconnected in the last few years, and he's just a great guy. But it is funny because when I was writing the movie, I was kind of trying to turn some of the tropes on their heads, and so there's very few movies that have like a final guy in it. It's always a final girl. So I wanted to write a movie with like a final guy in it, and his character, I think, is definitely stands out as he's such a great actor too. Did a great job, and he was Casper, so it's just very funny making fun of him because he was in Casper floating around with Christina Ricci when they were kids dancing. It was ridiculous. Devin, if you're watching this, ridiculous.
I would see him in so many things, like because I used to go into Blockbuster all the time.
Yeah.
I just remember, there he was again. And,
yeah.
But at that time, was he?
Yeah, he was really hot then too. I think he'd oh man, there's something north. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was a group. It was some coyotes and kids in the wilderness. I'm totally not going to move it up, but it was a really big movie. It was Casper, and then that one he did Idle Hands. I think Idle Hands might have been, I don't know if that was pre or post Final Destination. I think it might have been post Final Destination. But yeah, he was definitely like on everybody's ones to watch list. So,
right.
And we shot it in Canada, so we got a lot of Canadian talent
okay.
For the film as well.
Does horror screenplay structure different from drama?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think all screenplays kind of follow the basic 3-act kind of save the cat kind of structure. I think the biggest difference with horror is they do want kills pretty frequently. So the standard rule is like every 10 pages they want to have either a really scary scene or a kill. So in drama, it's not like you have to have like a super dramatic moment every 10 minutes. Like you can build the drama, and you can still do that in horror as well. But a lot of times, just the formula. At some point, I can't tell you how many projects I've been on where they're like, "Hey, it's been a while since somebody died. Nobody's died here in a while, so may want to throw another death in there." So then you have to add in a character to kill off. So,
right.
But I think all the screen, it's like I think comedies are very close to horror because it's always building up to a joke, and horror you're building up to a kill. But with comedies, it's a lot of more jokes, and with horror again you have more of a pacing with your kills. But they all do follow the same general structure. But usually, the joke in horror when it's like, well, what's this character's motivation? It's like to get away from the guy with a knife. It's like that's pretty much it for a lot of horror.
Right. Well, I'm dating myself with all this, but I think it seems like Friday the 13th, there were definitely more kills. But if you look at like Carrie, which I know you brought that up, that she doesn't really get her revenge until the very end, which it would have been nicer to see her do it sooner.
Right.
And then The Exorcist,
that took a long time.
Yeah.
But The Omen was pretty. That's the thing is like movies, and it's all they blame it kind of on ADD now. Everybody's like, so overly overloaded with information that they can't concentrate. So they act like the quiet movies don't work anymore. But then you see something like Get Out, which was definitely not like a gore fest at all, or even like the early Conjuring films like didn't have like a lot of like it wasn't like a kill every 10 minutes. So people still want to go see a good story, and they like suspense and dread. But it really depends on what you're writing. If you're writing a splatter kind of Friday the 13th movie, which for that one they just want blood and pretty people getting hacked up, or if you're doing like a Conjuring, which is more like people want to go on, just feel that dread and jump and scream and without the body parts flying around.
Right. I think Nightmare on Elm Street too, there was many more kills, but I was just wondering if the kills have increased now because of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it depends on the filmmaker. Like, I think if a studio's behind something, they definitely want to kind of stick with formula and make sure. I mean, I've had that note on a couple of projects I've written. I'm finishing one for a French company, and I have more Leo with them because they let me develop the characters a little bit more than I think I would if it was an American film. But I still have enough good scares in there, but there's not a lot of like gore. And I love writing gory stuff, and I love writing non-gory stuff too. So I think it's just fun to try to scare people in ways that I haven't seen them get scared before.
How important is screenplay structure to your overall writing? I mean, is there a specific structure you try to follow?
I found, because I kind of learned how to write through reading a ton of scripts. Like at New Line, when I was there, I just read all scripts all the time. So I find that most of my stuff does kind of fall into the, traditional like 3-act structure, save the cat thing, where that's the inciting incident. I don't get into. There's some stuff, and I shouldn't roll my eyes at it because people do. But there's some books that are like, well, you have to have. They've broken it down to like super microscience, and for me, it's just like, it's just too much. Like, in a way, you don't want to beat the creativity out of somebody by giving them too much of a structure. I think that's why I think the 3-act structure is enough. Where, yes, at the end of your second act, something's got to like propel you into the third act, and things have got to get more intense and more intense to your finale. But I think a lot of times, even like I have a lot of friends that go to film school, and their one thing is like they're like, I wish I had spent that money to make a film, because they're like, we would have learned a lot more. And it's not anything against going to film school, but it's just, again, if you're trying to teach somebody who's artistic you can teach them how to channel that into a format that's going to be more palatable to the masses. But if you start getting too much into like, on page 20 this has to happen, on page 30 this has to happen, then you're like stifling people's creativity in a way. But there is a reason that there is a structure like that sometimes, because I had friends give me a script and like the first draft's like 140 pages. I'm like, I'm not reading 100. This is not a script. This is like a mini series. Like, they're like, oh, but if you don't understand, it's like, if they can tell the Titanic in 120 pages, I'm sure you can tell your story about a woman who's trying to find true love in her small town in less than 140 pages. So, there is a wisdom to the basic structure. But when I sit down to write something, usually I start with a concept. I'm very concept driven, just because I think that's working at a studio for so long. I know that the concept is what's going to get people's attention or not get it. So I start with usually a concept. And then think of some scares as well, and then start, with building a story around the concept. Is how I approach it. But I know a lot of people start from like characters, and some people start from a story. So everybody's got their own personal kind of creative style and how they work. But for me, I always start with the concept of the story, and I try to think at least of a concept that's kind of high concept that you can kind of, if you tell somebody in a minute and they're like, oh, that sounds cool, So that's kind of where I start off when I'm writing.
What do studio executives and producers say about story structure? Or do they not? Is it just, this isn't working here? Or do they narrow it down?
I think it depends. I mean, every studio is so different now, and the studios have, honestly, they've changed so much since when I started off. Like I said, a lot of them, are run by business people with no creative background at all. So, they're, understand, like they're relying on their creative team. And that's not every studio by any means, but it has gotten a lot more business oriented. So I've been in a lot of meetings where it's like, this isn't working for me. I don't know why, but it's just not. And they don't know. They just know that they don't like it. And so then you have to like try to fish around to kind of figure out what they don't like about it, or what's not working for them. And a lot of times it's just a very interesting business, because you meet so many interesting types, and you meet some really great, smart, creative people, but you also meet some people who got their jobs, and then you're like, how is this person like working? I don't understand, because they obviously know nothing about film. And I'm not even saying that, like, some of it's like sometimes ridiculous, where they'll say, well, can you make all the people 13? It's like, well, they're carrying machine guns and machetes and fighting monsters, so that might look a little ridiculous with the 13-year-old with a machine gun. Like, well, just try it, So a lot of times you'll get notes like that, or they'll give you a really crazy note that will derail your, like, I don't think a lot of people understand, like, you do knit a screenplay together. So if you pull a string out over here, it does have an effect in other places. So a lot of times they'll be like, well, just, the producer's sister wants a part, so just give that girl a best friend and just put her in one scene. I'm like, well, then it wouldn't be her best friend if she's only one scene. But then that affects all this other stuff, and we'll just make it work. So you'll get that a lot of times, where it's like, they'll give you like a really crazy note. So what I've learned to do over the many, many years now, is you have to be a little passive aggressive with them. And because they do, at the end of the day, everybody working in the business at least wants to be heard, and you try to, again, decipher what their note means. If their note sounds stupid, like if they're saying, well, if they're just telling you to put somebody's friend in the movie, that's not a creative note. But if they're like, well, we think there just needs to be a cat. I want a cat here. And you try to think, well, why do they feel it's so important to have a cat here? And then it's like, well, okay, maybe there's like some emotion that's missing here, or there's like, because when you see a cat, it just gives you the warm fuzzies. That maybe there's something that's missing in this scene that they want. So a lot of times if you go back to them and you say, well, you said you wanted a cat here, but what I think you were going for was that you're not feeling this and this and this. And they're like, yeah, that's what I mean. So a lot of it is kind of deciphering what they say. But as far as structure itself goes, I mean, they'll know structure a lot of times, but other times it's like, it's committee stuff. So, they'll have a reader cover a script first. So if the reader doesn't like it, then a lot of times it won't even go to a development executive or creative executive. Creative executive likes it, they'll give it to somebody higher up. If somebody else higher up likes it, they'll put it on their weekend read, which means that all the executive team will read it, and that's still a roll of the dice if they're going to like, So it's a tough business. But the great thing is there's so many other companies out there besides the major studios that you can go. That's why I always tell people to focus on, because getting into the studio is just really hard, because it's a machine now. Like, and so they're all putting out remakes and sequels and things based on comic books and video games, and so all their original content goes to their, if Chris Nolan wants to make Inception, yes, they will give him money. But then they're like, well, our slot's full. We've got all of the Marvel movies coming out for 5 years now, and one movie that's not a Marvel movie. So, yeah, they don't care so much about structure. It's more of a business model, I think, a lot with the studios. So you learn that, and that helps you take your ego out of a lot of stuff, so you don't take it personally, because it really is a business. I think they do care more about business models than they do script structure.
Do you know when that changed? I mean, I realize you probably can't say, yes, it was 2001 on this date. But...
No, I mean, I think it started to change in the 90s, I think it started changing, and then, like, because when I started working at New Line, it was in the early 90s, and it was those, I think, 60s was very, that's a lot of times when, 60s, 70s, I think a lot of that was creative. But I think in the 90s, I think when a lot of the corporations started wanting to be in the movie business. So then you had like, you know, Ted Turner buying like, you know, the studio, and then, you know, Warner Brothers buying the studio, and then everything just started turning into big corporations. And you know, then when you're, it does, you know, this is no offense to business people, but when you're business minded, that's all you think about is your bottom line. It's like, well, how can I, you know, how can I tick off as many boxes to make sure this movie has the widest appeal, as opposed to like, if I make this really good movie, even though I don't get it at all, you know, I'm going to take a chance on it because I trust that there will be enough people that will watch it. Like, that's why I love New Line Cinema, you know, because Bob Shea really fostered that. It was very maverick, you know, thinking back then. And Mike DeLuca was one of the best development executives I think that ever worked at a studio. I mean, he was, you know, he would do a movie, and, you know, like a movie like Blade, they'd be like, who wants to see a black vampire slayer? Well, a lot of people, you know, who wants to see a movie about a guy that puts on a mask and he's, you know, can do all this great, who wants to see him, you know, like about these two really dumb guys, you know, like he would really champion all these movies that most studios would never ever take a chance on, but he got it. He's like, no, you have to trust me on this. Like, people will go see these movies, and you don't see that fearlessness much anymore in studios, and that's just, they just like to play it safe, and that's, again, you can just see it from their slates. That's why they're remaking remakes now, and you know, the thinking is, well, if people know the title, then that gives us a leg up over an original film, so it's a safer business proposition. So it's kind of, that's why a lot of people are going to TV now, is because that's where you can go and be creative, and, you know, they're spending almost as much on TV stuff as they're spending on movies now, and you can have really great creative storytelling and not be like stifled.
So back when you were at New Line, do you remember that people would know sort of character arc, and it was much more about the craft of writing, that they could understand and dissect certain parts and why they didn't like it? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I think
notes?
in the development meetings there's definitely like, there was stuff that the notes were definitely much more like, this isn't working because of, it's not, the creative stuff isn't being satisfied in it. Whereas later on it was just like, I don't like it, or there's not a big actor attached, or I can't make a toy out of it. But, you know, even New Line, they started a division called Fine Line that was more for their art house films that didn't, you know, fit the traditional blockbuster, you know, structure, or you know, would probably win an Academy Award, but would probably not make a lot of money. So they created a division especially to let like auteur filmmakers do their thing, you know, without having to worry about, is this going to make $100 million at the box office or not? So, that was part of just a film lover kind of company, like creating like an offshoot to make like kind of artsy films that most people would read the script and be like, what is this? Helen Hunt with a piano and her daughter sitting on in the middle of nowhere? Well, that doesn't make any sense. So,
do you remember the first movie you saw in the theater?
I don't actually, which is really, really weird. I remember seeing Nightmare on Elm Street in '84.
In Kentucky?
In Kentucky. I remember seeing that.
Yeah. When you were there, sorry to interrupt, but did you think, were you already thinking of writing this other script?
No, I just thought this is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. Because it was a double feature. It was like Alone in the Dark, which New Line put out as well, which was a slasher movie about some escaped mental patients who get out during a storm one night. Jack Palance was in it and terrorized like a town in this house. And so Nightmare on Elm Street was the second movie after that. So the first one was scary, but it was, I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street, especially when you're 14, it was just brilliant. Like, I was like, what the hell is this movie? So it just kind of blew my mind. So it is funny. I remember seeing like Salem's Lot on TV, but it is funny as far as movie theaters go. For some reason, my brain is just, oh no, I do remember. I don't, this isn't the first one I saw. This is awful, but they used to do these movies, and they were rated R movies, but they were stupid, like Pom Pom Girls or something, some cheerleaders. So my cousins and my mom, of all people, my mom was a little bit of a hippie. They would take us to the drive-in and they would sneak us in, but they would make us turn our backs to the screen during any nudity stuff. But we'd sit with like a little picnic. I don't remember the name of the movie. It was something in the Pom Pom Girls or some cheerleaders. I think that was the first drive-in movie I remember seeing. But I remember me and my sister spent most of our time with our back to the screen, eating popcorn and hot dogs and stuff. But yeah, I remember that because they had to sneak us in the theater under
nice
like a good old hippie living.
If you were to get notes, and maybe they wouldn't put it in these terms, but to dumb down a script.
Oh yeah, I've had that happen.
Oh, you have? Okay, in those exact words. Okay, so what is dumbing it down, and what would that be? And what is like raising the vibration, if you want to use a hippie term?
No, I mean, I wrote a script and Return to Cabin by the Lake, actually. It was a TV movie, and it was a sequel, and Judd Nelson was in the first one. And so they got him back and the director back based on my script, and literally one of the creative executives like called the producer probably about a month before they started shooting and was like, we think the script's just too smart for our audience, so we're going to bring somebody in to dumb it down. And so all that meant was that they just went for the very generic with the characters, just the base generic stuff. So it's like, it was based on the first movie was based on a killer who needed inspiration, so he started murdering people. He lived in a cabin by the lake and would murder women and drown them in the lake, and then he would write about it. So I wrote a script that was about them making a movie about the first movie. So it was kind of very Screamish. And so like in my script, this is just one simple instance, but in my script, like, he was dating the lead actress, and so all these other actresses was like throwing themselves at the director, and he was like in love with the leading actress. So and they're like, well, he should be sleeping with all the actresses. I'm like, but that's like that's just the most obvious stereotype. Like, I'm trying to do something different. So they made, so that's dumbing it down. It's like going for just the base, like, simplest thing we can do with no nuance. And I think when I've gotten notes that the script needs to be elevated, it's just because I haven't done enough work on the characters. There's not enough depth to their interactions. Their interactions maybe are very on the surface in some scenes, or the story's maybe there's points in the story that are very on the nose. So I think nuance is usually when I'm asked to elevate something, it's either to add more layers or to add more nuance to something. But yeah, dumbing it down, I mean, that was a prime example where it's just like they're like, he should just be sleeping with everybody because he's a director, and the producer should be doing coke, and so it was just, and so they brought one of their people on today. Like, they didn't even tell me, and the producer would not even. I asked her to send me a screener of the script, and she's like, I can't. I'm like, is it that bad? She's like, I can't. I remember watching it with some friends. I was sitting there like a little tear, like that Indian when you litter, like on the sidewalk, like a little tear went down my eye. I was like, wow, really?
I remember that.
But it's pretty funny watching it. I mean, it's a campy movie. So, and the director, I think, once he saw it, because he signed on based off my original script, and I think when he saw the shooting script, he's like, screw it, I'm just gonna make this like a comedy. And so he just like went really over the top and gonzo with like the sound effects and everything. So he almost shot like a comedy version of a horror movie. So it's pretty interesting to watch now. I should have kept a copy. There's like selling on eBay for like $100 and some bucks now.
Wow.
I know. I was like, wow, I should have kept a copy. I never even thought about it. So.
Do you get more notes to dumb something down or to flesh something out?
I get more notes at the writing stage to flesh stuff out, but then I think when things go into production, that's when things start getting, especially in horror movies, they were like, we need to get to the kills quicker. Like, that's the common note that I get for horrors. We need to get to the kills quicker. So any jokes or character stuff that they can cut out, they'll try to cut out just to get to the kills quicker. So I wouldn't even say it's dumbing it down, unfortunately. I would just say it's, they just want to get right to the blood and the murder, so...
Is there a time frame when the movie starts? How like within 30 minutes there should be conflict or whatever. So same thing. Is there?
Yeah, with
a dead
horror
body?
films, it's usually you have a death in the opening of a horror film, and then 10 minutes in or 15 minutes in you have another one, and you kind of keep up. They want you to keep up a steady tick with them. So it's interesting when movies don't do that. And I've certainly written stuff where there hasn't been a death in the opening. But then people, you start watching it, and it's like people want to get to that death quicker. So if you test market it or do a test screen, not test market, but if you test screen the film, people might be, oh, it took a while to get to that first kill, or it started off boring, and they're like, okay, they want, so sometimes the answer is to actually just shoot a death scene to stick in the beginning of it.
So you get it out of the way.
Yeah, because that'll buy you some, and I've learned to do that now, because I've tried in other films not to do that, and I've just learned that if you open with a really big death, that will give you a lot of like real estate to build your story and stuff, because people will still be thinking about that death for a good 5 or 10 minutes, and so you've got some time to like build characters and not have to jump right into another one right away.
Interesting. So instead of the hero's journey, the serial killer's journey.
Right.
there's different things that they need to follow as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then too, in terms of the evil character, is there times when, you know, you're making him too humanized or too likable? Can you tone him down and make him so you don't know what the motive or?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a couple of like thriller kind of horror movies, and I think for me, it's like you want to either have a villain that just terrifies everybody completely, or is a fun villain because they kind of relish the bad stuff they're doing. So it depends on what kind of killer they are. I mean, you don't want to romanticize your killers, like if, you know, and I try to stay away from, even though I watch them and I love them, but I try to stay away from more of like the torture-y, like, you know, let's tie a woman up and like torture her for 10 minutes, and then let's tie a guy up and torture him for 10 minutes. Like, I try to stay away from that kind of stuff because it just doesn't hold my interest for very long. When I was young, it did because it was bloody and that's all I cared about. But you know, if it's a killer like that, you don't want to humanize them, I don't think, because then you're in this weird place where it's like, okay, I'm just watching this person like torture people for 90 minutes, and now you're trying to make me have sympathy for them. And, you know, it's, again, there's enough of that in real life. Like, there's enough,
Sure.
You know, there's just enough really bad people out there in real life that I think when you go to watch a horror movie, you want to be like scared and entertained, but it's still, you want to escape. I think you don't want to go there to be reminded of like real life stuff. So yeah, a real life sociopath is going to be like, the neighbor's like, oh, he was such a nice guy, even though he's quiet, and he was chopping up people. So it's like, you don't want to necessarily have that be your killer in a horror film.
Well, going back to Carrie, though, you could see why she got to that stage.
Yeah.
And just like you had said, and I felt the exact same way, I wish she'd gone to that stage earlier.
Yeah.
But, so I think with Carrie, you were able to feel maybe more empathy.
Yeah. And she was never, I mean, because they kept, yeah, she had John Travolta in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the character's name, but the mean, you know.
The girl, yeah.
The mean girl
right.
and him, you know. So you had the villains who were actually, so she was always the hero that just got pushed to the breaking point.
Sure.
And so you can have, I think, somebody like that. You can have somebody who we get to see turn dark because of the circumstances they're put into. But if it's a kind of a traditional horror movie where you've got like the good, you know, the good person versus the evil killer, like, I think there's, you want the audience to maybe understand where the person's coming from. But if you get too far into where they sympathize with them, like, I think that's one of the reasons, one of the disagreements me and my friends have about the movie Don't Breathe. You know, I thought it was beautifully shot and well done, but I thought I won't spoil anything for anybody, but I thought the protagonists, the kids, were very unlikable. And then I thought the antagonists, they went too far to make you sympathize with why he was doing what he was doing. Like, when you know, but the whole setup, this is in the previews, but when the whole setup is 3 kids are going to go rob a blind veteran, you know, that you're kind of setting up some characters that you're like, we don't really like him. And then you find out, and this isn't a spoiler either, that he's got the money because his daughter got killed by a drunk driver. So it's like, okay, you're really bad people now.
Yeah.
Like, you're robbing from a blind veteran who has money because his daughter got killed by a drunk driver. So it's hard to, you know, so they throw in moments in the movie where they try, you know, flashbacks or scenes where they try to force you to feel like some sympathy for the characters, but for me, it just didn't. You know, I was just like, you lost me at the beginning, and then they made the villain so sympathetic that you actually I wanted him to like end up just killing them at the end of it, which is not I don't think what you want in a movie.
When do you start writing every day?
About 11 o'clock. I usually roll out of bed and have my routine where I'll, you know, say some prayers, meditate a little bit, not much, read the news, see what's going on, and then pack up and usually go over to the coffee shop and start writing. So, but I'm also a night owl too, so I stay up late writing. So it's sporadic because I'm usually working, juggling like 4 or 5 different things at one time. So I'm kind of usually hopping around to make sure I'm kind of on top of whatever needs to be done first.
How long are you writing for?
It's on and off pretty much all day. I mean, you know, I'll be up late watching TV, but still have my laptop on and writing a little bit. So, you know, it depends. If I have a writing assignment, then I'll be more structured. And then as far that I'll make sure that I focus on that and then try to like have fun and have a life the rest of the time that I'm not writing. But if I'm in a stage where I'm like working on 4 or 5 different things, trying to get them off the ground, then I'm usually writing quite a bit.
Interesting. So you go to the coffee shop. Do you ever write here in this beautiful apartment?
Sometimes, but if I stay here, I get very distracted. Like, I want to watch TV, I want to take a nap, I'm very comfortable here. So I like to go out to the coffee shop because I get my socializing done too, because I have friends there and stuff like that. So I like to get out and do that as well.
There's a lot of regulars there that write too. Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So
nice.
A lot of writers.
Do they ask you what you're writing on, or no one really asks that? They just kind of
people will talk to you, and especially if you go there a long time and you've made friends with people, they kind of know what you're up to, and if they follow you on social media and you're talking about stuff, they'll ask you about what you're doing and things like that. So it's fun. It's very transitory though too, because there's a couple of regulars, but a lot of the writers will, if they move, then they'll go to another coffee shop, or they'll go work at, like, the WGA has a space to work at, or people like rent spaces now, which I'm actually thinking about doing, because I think I broke it down in I forgot what the place is called, but there's a company where you can, like, go rent an office space, and I can't remember any of these names, but I did the math, and it's like, oh well, for the cup of like a Starbucks coffee and a donut every day, I could actually rent this place for a month, and they have free coffee all day. But I drink tea, so I don't know. I have to check to make sure they have tea.
Probably not as good as Starbucks though.
No, but it's a cool, like, you can get like a desk and like a computer, and you have your own little spot. So it does, if you're actually leaving your place to go to work, it does kind of put you in a different mindset. Because even if I'm walking to Starbucks, even though I'm going there to work, it's like I'm going to see my friends, and I'm going to be distracted, and you never know what's going to happen. So there is definitely some wisdom to having like a writing space that's like an office, so that's kind of, I'll do that at some point. I haven't done that yet, but I'll have a place where I'll have like an office that's just a separate building aside from where I'm living.
Right. Yeah, I was always opposed to coffee shop writing for the longest time, and then I noticed that if you have headphones on and you can still sort of see what's going on around you, it actually is invigorating.
Yeah.
Whatever you're working on, even if you're not screenwriting, you're just working on something.
Right.
I was
you have to
surprised
have the
at
headset.
Yeah.
Or the headphones. Those are important, because otherwise people just come and start talking to you.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it's a good buffer. It's a good social buffer, to have those on. But also libraries too. I mean, I'm just surprised that actually it does feed you. And I was opposed to it for the longest time, and I can tell now why people need to get out of the house.
Because you need that little segue from being in your home to your brain going, okay, we're going to work now. And it's hard to, if I'm just going from my bedroom to the living room, it's hard to just sit over here and say, okay, turn on my work brain, because then I'm like, wait, what's on TV? And I'm going to take a nap really quick, and
Right, or if I see an interesting article on like Flipboard or Pocket or something, and then I'm like, let me just read this, and then and I'm distracted. So
once you get derailed, then it's kind of
right.
You have to work to get the focus back again.
Would you say you're very disciplined when you know that you need to get these 4 things done? That you're pretty good? Yeah,
I think my friends think I'm more disciplined than I am. Like I think I could probably be more disciplined. I do work hard though, but it's I guess I am. But in my brain, I'm not disciplined enough. And my friends are like, you're so disciplined. I'm like, I feel like I'd be doing more if I was more disciplined. But I'm usually always juggling a lot at the same time. So, but you always want to make sure you don't have more on your plate than you can like really dedicate quality time to. So I've definitely learned the art of saying no as I've gotten older. Because when you're young, you want to say yes to everything because you think, oh, this could be my, these 3 opportunities could be the only things I ever get. So you're always like saying yes to everything. And as you get older, you start realizing like, it's okay to say no to stuff if you're not passionate about it, or if you don't think you'll have the time to really do it. And I've done that where I'm like, this really isn't my thing, and I don't think I'm the best writer for it. So, I know a lot of writers that will take, jobs just to have a job. And unless I think it's something that I could do justice to, I'm not going to take it on as a job. Unless it's a challenge. Sometimes there have been things where people have brought me projects where I'm like, this isn't my wheelhouse, but it would be really fun to try to write it. So then I'll do that, but it's got to be something that really strikes a chord with me.
Do you know any writers that write 8 to 10 hours a day?
Yeah.
Okay, so do they usually, I'm assuming they stop for lunch or they do something.
I know that I have a lot of writer friends that they do, if they're not on staff, they're very much like they treat it like a 9-to-5 job. So they'll, get up in the morning, they'll do their thing, then they'll write till lunchtime, they'll take lunch, they'll write till 5, and they'll stop writing for the day. And I think that's great if you're working on one thing at a time. I think you have the luxury of doing that more. I think if you're trying to do 2 or 3 projects at the same time, then it's harder to do that. But you can do it. I certainly have friends that do it. you know.
What are some of the most important questions you're asking yourself when you're developing a story idea?
I think who my audience is, you know, is the story interesting enough? Usually for my horror stuff, it's like, is there enough stuff in here to care about the characters, but am I also coming up with enough scares that we haven't seen before? Those are the kind of things that I ask myself. Like, it's interesting because I love doing it, and I've done it for so long that it's definitely, it's not easy work at all. Like, because people don't understand, like, again, especially when you're threading a script together and, you know, dissecting it and making sure that everything kind of lines up in pieces together. You want to put your best foot forward, but you also realize that a lot of times that once you sell the script and it's out of your hands, a lot of that stuff just goes out the window. So that's why I'm not as harsh when I see a movie. I reserve judgment on the writer until I read the actual screenplay, because you just never know what changes from page to screen. But for me, it's usually, especially because it's always horror films, it's like, you know, do I think this is going to strike a chord with people? Like, you know, Final Destination dealt with death, which is kind of a universal fear. So I try to think of concepts that will tap into something will reach a wide audience. You know, I'm not going to lie about that. Like, I do try to, you know, you want to hit as many people as you can, I think, with your concept. But that's what I love about the horror genre. I think themes are, you know, the fears that we have, most people are universal fears that aren't, you know, regulated to like one region or one part of the world or any, you know, I think we all kind of have the same fears deep down. So that's the thing I think love about horror, is you can kind of tackle a whole bunch of different kind of stories and still have it play well around the world.
I like how you use the analogy of it's like knitting, you know, and that if you know, let's suppose you're knitting or crocheting something and then you just pull one little string here, that it can really affect the whole, like, you know, sweater or whatever.
Right, and a lot of people don't realize that especially when they give you notes, they'll like, I know at one time I had a project where a director came in and the producers were like, they're like, we think he's full of shit, but we're going to give him a shot directing, because he directed a couple things before. But his pitch, he kind of came in and he had an opening scene that was, because the whole movie built around this plot twist about these characters not knowing each other. And his opening scene was basically, it was very clear these characters knew each other. And so, you know, my first meeting with him, I was like, well, you know, I was trying to be very diplomatic. I'm like, well, how do you propose that we do that opening scene so that we don't spoil the fact that they know each other? Because that's kind of the whole twist of the script. And it was one of those, well, you're the writer, you figure it out. And so it's like, okay, that's like you know, I will spoil the end of Usual Suspects if you haven't seen the, you know, but that's like going, you know, pretend that's, you know, Kevin Spacey didn't make it all up and Kaiser Sose is a real person. But you're like, but the whole point of the movie is and then they're like, or, you know, the end of The Sixth Sense, it's like, well, pretend Bruce Willis is like a real person and not a guy, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, when they come to do something like that, it's a little, they obviously don't understand. Like, you're taking the core of what makes this movie, like the core mystery, and you're giving it away at the beginning, so it's going to change the whole movie. And then they're just like, you'll figure it out. So it just shows a certain level of not understanding about, you know, how much thought you do need to actually put into a good screenplay.
And then when you said something earlier about, you know, that even something that you write that you are precious about, at some point there's like a letting go process, because you know that once it's sort of out of your hands, it could be changed. Yeah,
and you have to, and I think that's another, you know, kind of blessing of working at a studio, is I got to see that there, you know, even though, you know, again, New Line was very much about, you know, artists and you know, protecting their vision and things like that. There were a lot of times where, you know, we would get a script in that had like Jim Carrey attached to it, and there was another script that came in with nobody attached, but was a great script. Well, they're going to go with the Jim Carrey script first, obviously. And so that's just part of the business. So there's so many decisions. It's just like with acting. Like, it's so much different when you sit in an audition room than when you're going into audition, because, you know, obviously the people in the room, they don't know how much time that you've auditioned and how much, you know, you've auditioned for your friends and you've taped it and you've got to, you know, you've had acting coaches like coach you on line delivery, and you're sitting on the other side of the table when actors come in and they leave, and it's like, you know, that was the best actor, but, you know, his hair color is the same as the other two guys that we have, and, you know, and it's like, well, we could dye his hair, and then it's like, yeah, but then, you know, and then some of the smallest things will like be the deciding factor, and it has nothing to do with the person's talent. so you have to learn to detach at a certain point. Otherwise, you just, because the business, no matter what part of the business you work in, you're going to get more no's than yeses. Like, it's to get somebody else to make your movie. It's easy to make your own movie now because you can make a movie on your iPhone that looks professional. It's high definition now. But it's almost impossible if you think about the odds of getting someone else to put up money to make your movie. So getting a movie made in and of itself is a miracle. It really is. So to think about that, and then how hard it is to get cast for something, for every role that, when we put out a casting thing for every role, we'll get like 500, people that are submitted for like one role. And then you have to narrow those all down to people that come across good on tape, to the people that you actually call into the rooms, and then you whittle those people down, and you bring them in for chemistry reads. And there have been so many times where it's like we had two great actors that we love for a part, but when you get them together, they just had no chemistry whatsoever. And then these two actors, that we didn't think were as great as the ones before come in and have great chemistry, and you're like, it makes you rethink the whole thing. So yeah, that was a long answer about letting go, but you have to kind of let that filters over into probably any part of your life, because we all, no matter what we do for a profession, like we put we kind of identify ourselves by that. So we identify our value by how well we do in it. So, if no matter what you do, whether it's, you're a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, if you're not succeeding, then there's a part of you that feels like you're a failure. And you have to realize like so much stuff is out of your control. All you can do is your best. Like, that's why I like writing, because even, acting's even worse because you don't have any say over auditioning. Like you don't know if you're going to get an audition, but at least with writing, I can write. Like, nobody can stop you, from physically writing all the time. So like, that's one thing I have control over. So you can only worry about the stuff you have control over and do your best. But there are so many things outside of your control that have nothing to do with your talent. And oftentimes we do think if we don't get a part, or if we don't get a writing assignment, or if our movie doesn't get greenlit, we're like, oh, it's because we suck, our writing sucks, and you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's just a common feeling I think we have as human beings about stuff. If we don't succeed at something, we think it's a personal failure, for us as a human being, like we're failing, when it's really not that at all. It's just, there's so many other things that we have no idea that factor into that, final decision about what gets going, or what movie gets made, or who gets cast.
Did you always think like that? I mean, because that's a pretty mature way of looking at it, and I don't know, does that just come with having been rejected, or having seen the industry from the time when you were 19 working at New Line?
I think it was a little bit, I think it was seeing the industry from when, I think it was partly seeing the industry from when I was 19. I think part of it was how I was raised too. My mom was very, very much, she, a single mother, raised me and my sister, but she was very much about us getting education. I mean, we were biracial. We grew up in a really not accepting part of America when all of America wasn't very accepting when we were first born. So, we were raised in the Baha'i faith, which is very much about like unity of the whole world, and equality of men and women, and racism, equality of religion. And so I've definitely, mom has always, just that upbringing has always taught me to think about the bigger picture, like I feel, and it's not, doesn't make me any smarter or any better or wiser than anybody. It's just that, I grew up thinking about a world community as opposed to like just, my town and, my country. It's like, of course I love my country, but I realized that our country was part of a big world. And it seems like a lot of people didn't quite start realizing that until the internet came along, and they started going, oh wow, there's a whole world out there of other people that we're connected to. So I've always tried to, and it's been to my benefit and to my detriment. Like, I always try to see like all sides of an issue. I try to, I have friends from every background on the planet. Some people that are hardcore like atheists, and people that are hardcore religious, and people that are right wing and left wing, and people that and because the one thing that my mom always taught us growing up is, and again, it's being born in '69, that was when the last school was desegregated in '69. So, people tend to kind of forget how we haven't had as much time from a lot of the ugliness that we'd like to think that we do. And so I got to see a lot of that firsthand growing up. But my mom was always like, don't judge these people by what they're doing now, because they're only treating you how they were taught to treat you. This isn't defining who they are. And so you have to like, pray for them and wish them well and not do that. And so I try to take that approach with everything. And sometimes myself, and I fail miserably at it a lot of times too. But I think that taught me at a young age just to not to separate, but just to kind of see a bigger picture kind of point of view. Because I knew, things weren't always going to be horrible. Like, when I was like facing racism growing up. And then, on top of that, then I came out being gay. And then it was like, well, we can't call him this word, but now we can call him this other word now. And then, so so you see people just kind of replacing, prejudices with other prejudices. And it all comes from places of like fear and, and ignorance. I don't mean that in an uneducated way, but just, when people aren't exposed to something. Like I did a podcast the other day, and the topic was, but you're not like the rest of them. And that's what I heard a lot of times growing up, where people that were racist were like, oh, but you're not like the rest of those black people, or you're not like the rest of those gay people. And they would just say all these horrible like stereotypes about them. So it's interesting when you see the world kind of from that perspective as a little bit of an outsider who is trying to understand like all sides of something, because you realize the solution lies in the middle somewhere. And not screaming at this side or this side, and that there really aren't two sides. It's just, it makes us feel better if we're like fighting against somebody as opposed to trying to like look for a solution. So that kind of thinking has just been, that was inbred in me, or not inbred in me, but you know what I'm saying? Like that was kind of instilled. Thank absolutely. You. That's what I was looking for. I'm a writer.
But it's emotional, I'm sure, to bring that up.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, but that was instilled at me from a young age. Mom always taught me that the world is bigger than me and bigger than what was in my immediate vicinity. So like, even if I was going through a rough time and growing up in like pre-middle school and things like that, she's like, there's a world beyond that you're going to get to at some point. And and I've just so that's always taught me just not to internalize stuff as much. But the bad side is that my life I am very much a people pleaser, where I want to make everybody happy, and I want everybody to get along, because it really is such a simple. It just is as simple sometimes as sitting down and listening to somebody instead of talking. And I talk a lot because I'm a writer, so I always joke like we don't interact that much with people because we're always in front of our laptops, so it's hard to shut us up when you get us out there. But when you actually, that's why I'm able to have friends with so many different beliefs, because I actually sit down and we don't agree on everything. But it's so funny when you talk to people. There's automatic defenses that they go to when you talk about certain topics and things, and so I know what those are because I see them. People just fall into those defenses all the time. So then I always try to figure out how to talk around those and how to, what I'm saying, not to. It's like when you have a sibling. I love my sister to death, but she knows how to push my buttons. So it's like when she pushes a button, I can either react in a different way, or I can react the way that I've reacted for my whole life and say the same thing back to her that I always say that I know is going to start a big fight. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I view life as too, is like, when you're going through life, it's like dealing with people, dealing with situations. It's like it's easy to get caught up in the emotion of that moment and react. And I feel like I'm like going off tangent here now, but
do you put a lot of that in your scripts? I mean, especially being in a town where there is such a maybe a look of like, this is the right way, this is not the right way, and feeling like that outsider, because I think that shapes a lot of artists in a very intense way. You think you put a lot of that in your scripts?
I don't put a lot. I think I try to be much. I think I try to just write stuff and then have the inclusivity like speak for itself, even though a lot of that gets taken out of my scripts. Like I'll write scripts that have like people from different racial backgrounds, or most of my scripts except for Final Station are very strong women at the center of it. Like I haven't written, none of my scripts have had nudity in them. Just because I don't think I need it. Now sequels have, but for me it's like I don't think I need it unless it's there was a butt shot in my last movie, but it was tastefully done.
Oh, good.
And it was from afar, and it was just somebody walking out of the bathroom.
Oh, okay.
But so I try to like. It's more like I don't, because I never want to, because I write horror movies. I mean I kill people on screen, so it's like I can't really. You don't want to get too preachy with messages, like in Final Destination. I mean, you could say, yes, it's, you never know how long you have to live, so enjoy life while you can. But on top of that, I know that I can write like, a really, hopefully complex like female character, or I can write a gay character who's not a stereotype, or I can, have a Muslim character in there. And a lot of times, again, these characters get taken out after I've sold a script, so I've had to learn to kind of let that go. And I'm, moving more into directing and producing now, so that I can kind of put that stuff back in there, because for me, it's just about showing people as people, and I think that's how you break down walls. And it's sometimes it's easier. It's kind of a joke that does tie into the topic, but it's like, I've been sober for like 11 years now, and I notice that every time, so all my friends, every time somebody gets sober, like all their scripts always then have somebody who's either an alcoholic or just got sober in their scripts. Like, and it's just because all of a sudden you feel like when you don't realize how prevalent alcoholism is, even though you're not supposed to ever diagnose anybody else as being alcoholic. It has to be self-diagnosed, but you just never realize how prevalent alcohol is, until you get sober. And then it's like you go to a party that's sponsored by Sky Vodka, and then you're like, can I just get a Coke? And they're like $7. I'm like, but you're giving away vodka, cranberries for free. Yeah, but that's our sponsor. I'm sober. I don't care. $7. So you don't realize how much alcohol is like pushed on you until you don't drink anymore. So when something like that catastrophic happens in your life, when you quit something, like that, then I think a lot of times you'll find writers like we'll put that in our stuff, or we'll bring it up, and but I think the outsider thing in general is what is a kind of a common theme you'll find amongst horror writers in general. Is I think that a lot of them weren't the super popular kids, and there's some really, and there were some horror writers I know that were really popular, and were prom king and queen. So, but a lot of them weren't, a lot of them were like the kind of comic geeks and the people that like to, just go off and do geeky things and not play the sports and try to be popular kind of people. So, it's a pretty eclectic mix, but yeah, I think everybody does their thing. I have some female horror writers who, some of the stuff that I read of theirs, I'm like, wow, this is actually has more nudity and leering at women than if a straight guy wrote this. Like, wait a minute, you said this is a feminist horror movie, right? I don't know. But I guess maybe you're, like I can't speak for, but I know writers that will try to make sure that they put a message, like in their movies or something that's really important to them. And for me, it's more like just trying to, like I have a movie at Lionsgate right now that's got pretty much like a 95% African-American Latino cast. And it's not about, it's just a horror movie, it's a slasher movie. And I just tell people, it's just like if you're watching Scream where it's like a bunch of pretty white kids and there's like, well, not even the first one, they didn't have any black people in the first one. But, one of the later Screams, where you're watching a bunch of pretty white kids and they have like the one black friend. Our movie's like you're just focusing on all the pretty black and Latino kids and they have a couple of white friends. So it's not that you're making a movie that's about race, it's just you're casting a movie that's just focusing on a different group of friends than most of the horror films do. So I think that type of movie, in my humble opinion, will actually reach a wider market because, again, white audiences just want to go see a good horror movie. Like they don't care what color the characters are. And then people of color who are horribly underrepresented in horror films are a huge audience for horror films. We've just done all the tests. Even at New Line, we did test marketing back in the 90s, and it was like in all the major cities, it was like 50%. Of the horror audiences in all the major cities were African American, Latino, and it's such a horribly underserved market that they'll go to see the movie numerous times because they've never seen themselves represented on screen as just people. And regular horror fans, not regular, that's awful. I'm trying to be so PC right now. Screw that, I'm no snowflake. White horror fans, as long as it's a good slasher movie, they're going to go see it a couple times too. So that's going to be a really good kind of social experiment. And it's taken me like 20, I've been trying since I tried to have a, black lead in one of the Final Destination movies, and it's never happened. And, so it's taken me 20 some years to like finally get a movie going, So it's funny when we talk about, where race is in America, and it's like, oh, we voted for Obama, so we're post-racial now, and everything's hunky-dory. And it's like, it's not, because Hollywood's pretty friggin' liberal, but they know what sells and what won't sell, and they know how people like pigeonhole kind of movies. And sometimes they do underestimate people's intelligence in a way, or what they'll go see. But there's just also the hard reality that you have to prove to them, like a movie like Girl Trip that came out with Jada Pinkett and Queen Latifah, and makes $30 million opening weekend, and they're like, what? And Wonder Woman comes out, directed by a woman and about a woman superhero. What? They act so surprised, and it's like, nobody wants to take a chance on something that's different. So you have to find that person that will, or that studio that will, and then once you do, I guarantee you, once this movie comes out, there's gonna be a whole bunch of, slasher horror films that are like, heavily like diverse cast. So, so again, it's kind of like a quiet fight. I haven't been running around like, yelling after every finalist and he comes out going, I wanted a black character to be the lead, and they wouldn't. Like, that's not going to do me any good. That's just going to upset people and make people think that I'm like crying racist. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to be productive. So you just kind of have to put your best foot forward and put your money where your mouth is, and try to, till you find the people that like kind of get behind the movie, like the one that we're doing now.
So did you try to add a non-white character to any of the Final Destination?
Yeah.
And what would happen?
They would just cast a white person.
So you would write it into the script,
yeah,
as to who this character was,
yeah,
and then when you saw the final product,
yeah,
that person
yeah,
wasn't there. Okay.
Yeah, and it was and the reality is internationally, movies, if the lead is a person of color, they don't sell as well internationally. And I get, except for like like a Halle Berry or a Denzel Washington, or there's like maybe 5 names that will, in certain genres, will sell internationally. But a movie like Get Out comes out and it makes $100 million here, and it only costs like $5 million to make. It's like, who cares what it makes internationally? Like, you're gonna make that money here. So there is a little bit of business reasoning behind it, but a lot of it's like, until you try to break the mold, you never know what the mold. You never know until you try to break the mold. And that's why I think this last year with Get Out and Wonder Woman were so important, is because even though I even on my Facebook before it came out, I'm like, I'll bet my life that Wonder Woman's gonna be one of the top selling superhero films of all time. And it's just because people they underestimate how powerful of an impact Linda Carter had as Wonder Woman. So pretty much everybody in their 40s, 50 and above, and late 30s, anybody who kind of grew up on seeing Linda Carter as Wonder Woman loved that character, and she's been around forever. And then you got younger people meeting her in the Justice League. So I knew the movie was going to do like huge business, but nobody, it's like when people say, oh, if an openly gay actor were to play a, like James Bond, nobody would believe it. And I'm like, why don't we try it first? Like, because I think people that go watch movies like know that Robert Englund's not a child molesting serial killer that wears I'm sure that they know he's not like that in real life. So I don't know. It's funny. So you just try to make whatever changes you can with your art, and a lot of times it doesn't even happen. And again, I work in the horror genre, so for again, it's even harder to try to like you can't get too high-minded in a horror film. You can again you can try to make strong female characters, make interesting dynamics between everybody, show diversities of just people of any like religion or background, and you can try to put all that in your movie, but a lot of times that ends up getting out of your hands once you sell the script. So you just kind of, again, that's when you learn to kind of let go and be grateful that you had a movie made.
Can you think of an example where you wrote yourself into a corner, and then how you wrote yourself out?
Yeah, pretty easy. Tamara was a movie I wrote myself into a corner, because it was, like, that's a tough thing in horror films, is you create your villain, you make them really strong, and it's like you have to come up with a way to stop them, and you don't want to do something super generic. But Tamara was kind of my homage to Carrie, about a girl who's picked on and bullied, and these kids pull a prank on her and they accidentally kill her, and she's in the script she's supposed to be like really frumpy and unattractive, and then they bury her in the woods, and the next Monday she comes into school and she's really smoking hot, and she knows all their secrets and their sins, and she uses that to turn against them. But I made her, she was really powerful, and so I'm like, if I stop her, it's either they're gonna have to find a spell. Since she's using the witchcraft, they're gonna have to find a spell to stop her, which is kind of, it's just, we've seen that 100 times. Like, how am I gonna? And I made her so strong that you can't kill her because she came back from the dead. So what do I do? And so I had to. If you haven't seen Tamara, spoiler. So I basically had to, I tied her fate to the teacher that she was in love with. So he ended up sacrificing, doing the heroic sacrifice, and grabs Tamara and jumps off a building with her, and sacrifices himself to stop her. So heroic sacrifice is always a good way in a horror film to get yourself out of a corner, because that's the thing when you create a monster, is you have to figure out a way to kill it, and then it's like you don't want it to be something overly complicated, but you don't want it to be something as simple as the spell will just kill her. So yeah, that I definitely wrote myself into a corner with that movie, and I was like, well, I'll have the teacher, sacrifice his life to stop her.
And then when you got notes, let's say the first few times around showing them, what were the notes? What were the feedback about Tamara? Like, was she too much this, not enough this?
Tamara's probably the easiest. That was probably the easiest project as far as, we found a studio that wanted to do it, and they did it. Like, it was pretty easy sell, because I wrote that one because I wanted to have fun with the movie, because everybody had been like, bring us something like Final Destination, bring us something, and that, that's, and then you bring us something, oh, that's too much like Final Destination, and it's like, stop. So finally I just wanted to write something fun, and like in my head, and it was just like I wanted to write like a fun, like quotable, like campy, sexy, horror movie. I mean, it turned out really well. I did joke because of the budget, we had a certain budget, and then magically half that budget like disappeared before when we started shooting. So the movie turned out not, we didn't have the money that we went in the movie having. So I always kind of joke it's kind of like the PG-13, ABC Family version of an R-rated horror film that I wrote. So when you watch it, you can definitely see like a lot of places where it's like the story got kind of chopped out a little bit, and then stuff didn't go like, wow, they could have really pushed the envelope here, and they played it really safe, and that was all because of like, budget stuff or things like that. So that was another one where like I actually wrote a book with a friend of mine, JD Matthews, and we put it out just based on the screenplay so that people could see like what the original story was like, because the only thing we had to change on that, because there was some pretty intense stuff in there, but nobody ever said take it out. And that's what's always funny, because a lot of times it's the studio that wants you to take out stuff and play it safe. And the couple of movies where that's happened to me, it hasn't been the studio that's done it. It's been like either a producer like kind of running off with some money, or or somebody on the movie set like, oh no, let's tone this down, or let's do this. So I've had the opposite of what a lot of people have, where it's like the studio wants to play it safe. Like I had a couple movies where I'm like, I can't believe they're letting me get away with this, and then you get on set and then one of the actors is like, oh, I don't want to do this, and then they're like, okay. I'm like, damn it. It's like, usually the studio stops me, not an actor. So it's a very interesting business that we're in.
So having Final Destination and the various ones that you were a part of under your belt, do you think that sometimes it's difficult because they pigeonhole you as that, and you want to do something in a little bit of a different realm? Or is it nice because you're known for that, so then they have confidence? I mean,
for me, it's nice. I mean, just because I'm a horror fan, and I'll probably, I have a science fiction kind of horror overtones to it, but a big science fiction project right now we're doing. But, I might branch out a little bit, but I'm very happy writing horror. So I love the genre. So, and I used to, and part of it's like also from just growing up, you would read in Fangoria magazine, which is like the Bible for horror people. But, you'd read directors, they would do a horror film. They're like, well, it's not really a horror film. It's more of a supernatural thriller. And they would try to say everything but say it's a horror film. And then they would do a horror film because they know they're going to probably make a profit. And then they would quit making horror and go off and do other stuff. So even directors would be like, well, this is really a stepping stone to do what I want to do. And so growing up, you get really like, screw you. This is a great genre. So, and it is. And so, yeah, this is something I am very, embrace wholly. I love going to horror conventions and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a great fan base, and a lot of the people that I work with now that are my peers were all horror fans like me. We grew up loving the same stuff and watching the same stuff. So it's just a really fun community to be a part of.
Jeffrey, will you write on days when you don't feel inspired?
Yeah. I mean, I always joke my inspiration is I had to pay rent and I have to, I have bills to pay. So that's, I mean, there are times where I will give myself a break because I'm like, okay, I've been working, I've been writing every day for 10 days. And if I want to take a day off, it's okay. Like, so that's usually what happens with me. It's like, yeah, I learned to not do. Because I read a great quote somewhere, and I somebody can Google it and find out who said it, but they were talking about how, people, you don't wait for your muse to come. Like, you grab the muse and you strap it down to the chair and you choke it until it, because writers will find any excuse to not write. It's like working out or doing anything that you want to do, but you're a little like fearful that you're not going to reach out for it. You're going to find any excuse to put off writing. So you have to learn, like, not to, you can't say that you're waiting for inspiration, because you can inspire yourself. If you start writing, even if you write a couple pages a day, even if it's crap, you just train your brain to write. So it's a chemical thing that you do if you make yourself write every day at a certain time. I don't do this because I, again, roll out of bed and will start writing pretty early. But, during the earlier times, there were, when I was kind of like, I don't feel inspired, I would just do that. I would just get up and be like, all right, I'm going to write 2 pages, even if it's like awful stuff. And then you do actually get your brain wired to where those 2 hours will start coming, and your brain will start percolating before noon hits, and you'll start writing. And so you have to kind of train yourself to do it. But I understand that, I don't feel inspired today or whatever, but there comes a point where you have to make sure you're not just doing that because you're afraid of writing. Because I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she was complaining about how she's written this, humongous outline, this humongous treatment for it. She just hasn't started the script. And I said, well, because when you finish a script, you have to give it off, and it's like you're one step closer to like handing it over to people. So you're like stuck in this area, and a lot of times that's why we're procrastinating, is because we know once we start writing and we finish that script, we have to give it to somebody, and that's when the judgment comes. So I think that's a lot of times the reasons that, that's where that not feeling inspired is just like, I think that's just kind of not wanting to write, really.
Also, too, because you're close to your characters, and I'm not sure if this is the same for horror genre, but that you're losing your friends in some sense, because that's who you've been spending time with.
Right.
So handing it off is like almost ending a relationship.
Yeah, no, there is a weird place you get when you write something and you love it, and and you want to hand it off, and you want people that read it to just love it as much as you do. And if they don't immediately, then you're like, there's like it's like you're saying goodbye, you're ending something, but then it's like sending them off, and then having other people like and go, why were you in a relationship with that thing? That's an hideous choice for a partner. What were you thinking? So you don't want people to like not like your stuff too when you hand it off. So it's it's like when you audition, when you go up and audition in front of people that you don't know. I mean, you're putting yourself up there, and basically, even if you're being a character, you still feel like you're like, all right, love me and want me for this part, and if you say no, then you're rejecting me. So that's sure. That's just something it's really hard to, like, no matter how successful you get or how long you've been around, it's hard to let that go. Even now, if I get a pass on a script, it still stings a little bit, even if it's a place that I know it's not right for.
Would you say screenwriting is hard? Because I'm sure a lot of people could look at your story, they could look at your credits, and you make it look easy in terms of, wow, that's a really cool story. Here you were 14 and you send this, script idea off, and although it's rejected and you don't know what the notes are, you still have this relationship that really shaped you in a lot of ways. And I think it's a really cool story, and not a lot of people probably have that opportunity. But is it hard? Because it looks easy.
Yeah.
From the outsider's view.
Yeah. It's hard. It's always interesting, because if I have a story that I love and I've outlined it, then it's just fun. But when you're definitely trying to do a lot of things and get a lot of things, like, because again, I'm at the point in my career now where I want to just branch out and tell still horror stories, but like do something like the Lionsgate project, which is I think it's just a really important kind of thing that where you had to fight for it. It is hard because you want to write something that's going to strike a chord to people, but you want to write something that's successful. You want to write something that's going to spawn a franchise. And I've had, for better or for worse, for some of my films, they've done really well, and other ones that were supposed to turn out well didn't quite turn out the way they were supposed to, and went, direct to video or didn't get a good release. And you definitely have to stay in gratitude a lot of times, and you have to find the joy in it all. and the joy in writing. And I still love writing, especially when I'm, if I'm writing something else and I get something just inspires me to like I hate to say a kill scene, but like a kill, I'm like, oh my God, I just thought of a great scene for a movie that, I was so excited, and I called the producer about, and he's like, was in love with it. And so that's the fun stuff, it's like trying to come up with new things. But, it is hard to sit down in front of a computer every day and, writing a 100-page script, it is work, and it's not easy, because you're trying to write something that is going to be creatively satisfying. You're trying to write something that you think will sell, because this is your livelihood. So you're trying to juggle both of those things, but not get too far down the road that you're not focused on finishing the actual script. So you've got to keep all those other things or try to keep them out of your head about, is this going to sell? Is this going to make money? Are people going to like this? You got to try not to like focus too much on that and just get the script done. But that can be hard in and of itself. It's not future tripping about, what's going to happen with the script once you're done with it. So it's fun, but it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, there are harder, it's like with actors, because acting's not easy. To be a good actor is not easy, but, it's not like we're going into, putting out fires and, putting our lives in danger and, doing like physically hard labor. It's just mental exhaustion. It's a lot of mental work.
Did the screenwriting career that you envisioned look the same in terms of the day-to-day? Because you know how people have a romantic notion about what something is, whether they see it.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, like because you don't really envision with the writing, like you don't realize how long it takes to write a script, first of all, and then I had a friend once who was like, oh yeah, I just took a weekend trip to Hawaii and wrote my script on the beach with some Mai Tais. And I'm like, oh, that's what writing is. You just go off for a weekend and you write a script. And yeah, no, the day-to-day grind of getting, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pages a day done is like, it's a grind. And then you've also got life that you're living, and you also have to try to get out and have a life, because if you don't have a life, like I'm kind of joking, because we are, writers are so very solitary, but I do go out to the movies, and I do go out to dinner, and I do go out and do stuff with my friends, because otherwise if you sit at home all the time, you're not experiencing life, and so then you can't bring anything else to your scripts than what you've already experienced. So you're just kind of regurgitating the same experiences that you've had. So you've got to kind of make sure your cup is like flowing over with other things besides just work, but you have to take time out to do that too. So in terms of what most people would envision, like, you're at the keyboard and you've got not a drink, but, some people, they think that that's part of it, with the cigarette and just like this tortured existence. Oh, yeah.
And you're pounding out and then this thing is beautiful in it. But it sounds like there's more of a science to it, and it's not just...
There's a science, but for some people, again, everybody has a different method, which is very interesting. It's like with acting, like you have your method actors who have to be like, they have to become the character, and they have to, you have your other actors who, when the director says, rolling, then they go, and then cut, then they drop back into who they are. And I think there are writers that are the same way too. Like, there's a stereotype. Like, that's why I quit drinking. It's like I was becoming that stereotype. I was sitting here drinking at home and, thinking I'm writing some brilliant stuff. And yeah, the first couple pages were great, and then the rest of it's like, what the hell was I writing? So, you do think that that's kind of, I do have some friends that do torture themselves without the drink or anything. They just, it's like they obsess about every single line of dialogue, and it's like, you're never going to finish your script if you're like that. But again, that's how they are. So everybody's got a whole different process. And so that's why I always tell people, don't judge yourself harshly if your process isn't the same as somebody else's, because it really is your end result that matters. It's like getting that script finished. So you do obviously have to follow certain, structural rules, and certain, your dialogue needs to be good. It has to be an engaging story, but sometimes it takes people a lot longer. I've known friends where it's taken them 10 years to write a script, and it's not like they're working every day, 8 hours a day on it, but,
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had a couple friends that have like, I've been working on this for 10 years and it's great. Some of their stuff's great. And I've read some scripts where people have written a script in a week and it's great. Not consistently, but it's, everybody's got a different thing. And I think that's what's always interesting too, is we always have our ideas in our head, what everybody's life is like. And it's like, even what you think an actor's life is like their lives, the celebrities' lives, I mean, they're, they're like trudging into Starbucks with their dog and their kids crying and have to go change their kid's diaper, and just like everybody else is, so you definitely the glamour of Hollywood that they used to project and was so important back in the days of, the olden days with the Hollywood stars, which when it was like the stars ran everything and they had to keep up these perfect images. Like we've lost all of that now with like the internet and access to everybody's private lives, and we see people now on the street. People are taking pictures of people, and it's like, oh wait a minute, they're just like like that's even I think People or something has a whole thing like celebrities are just like us, and it shows pictures of them like walking a dog. And before that, you thought they were these magical creatures, and you thought these writers were these like tortured, sitting in a dark room like with just pounding away at a keyboard and sipping from their bottle of whiskey and cursing the heavens. And yeah, it's different for everybody. It's different for everybody. But they're all at Starbucks. I mean, they definitely coffee shops are full of writers in California. That's definitely a cliche that you can't. That's one cliche that's true. It's like you can go every coffee shop. There's 5 people working on a screenplay at any coffee shop that you walk into. So it's pretty funny.
How much time do you spend outlining a story? I know you had talked about a friend that had this like really long outline, and
yeah.
And do you keep it to one page, or how do you do it?
I usually do like maybe 2 or 3 pages. Like I'll do like a super rough outline, and then I'll just flesh out a little bit more, and then try to write the script after that. Because I find that most of the fun stuff comes when I'm writing. So I definitely try to have everything planned out as far as like, this is what's going to happen in the story, and these are the characters that are going to make it to the end, and here's when this person. I try to plot all that stuff out, but sometimes I leave stuff open because it's when you're writing it, all of a sudden like a lot of times you'll get inspired by some fun stuff.
How do you get better at writing? Was it through the notes that you got when you think about, let's say, being 16 and writing something versus now? What do you think was the main thing to really get you better at it, to really improve your craft?
I think it was reading scripts, and also that, which, you learn to turn it to a positive, is that insecure feeling that you have that, and I hear people talk about this all the time about like actors or whatever. They're always like, the way they always word it is like they're afraid that someday somebody's going to realize that they were a fraud and they're not really that good, as an actor or writer. And I think people that get better and better are people that have that thing in them where they're worried, that they're not good enough yet, so they strive harder. So that's, for me, it's like, I think if I ever get to the point where I'm like, oh, this is the best horror script that's ever going to ever be done, and so I've written it and I can just quit now, then I'm screwed. Because I meet people like that all the time where they're like, trust me, this is going to be the best movie you'll ever read, and it's like, it's not going to be the best movie ever, don't say that. Like, if you're, because again, it's, so I think that drive to constantly get better and top yourself as far as like the last thing that you did, like Final Destination, I'm very proud of that, because it was kind of because it was the first time that death had actually been like the killer in a film. So, it was kind of a benchmark kind of film. Like, I'm just trying to be nice about it, but it made it definitely has a bookmark in horror history. So that's enough of something to make me happy. But I want to, with the Lionsgate project, I want that to be another bookmark, as far as that was the first, studio released film with a, diverse cast. And it's my first slasher film too, so I'm getting back into the slasher, or not back in, but I'm, hopefully we'll kind of kick the new wave of slashers off. So now I forgot the point. What was it?
Oh, in terms of getting better, so it sounds like...
getting better, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's I don't want to, I always joke, I don't want to milk Final Destination. I don't want that to be on my gravestone, like he wrote Final Destination and that's like, my only thing. Like, so I want a couple more franchises before I die. So I know to do that I have to keep writing, and I know that I have to write good stuff, and hopefully something will stick.
How many pilots or TV series have you written?
Pilots, I have 5 pilots. We're out with 2 of them right now. 2 of them didn't get picked up, but I think there's always a shot. And then one I had optioned for a while, and then it came back to me once the company kind of changed their mandate. So yeah, I've written 5 pilots, and that's fun. I mean, TV. The great thing about TV is, they treat the writers are kind of like the top of the food chain in TV. which again is how it should be just in general, because again, unless somebody actually writes something, then everybody else, whether it's a director, actors, all the crew, like they don't have a job unless there's something written. Like, so, having a theater background, like, the play was always so important to us. Like, even the director was always like, it's about the written word. And then you move to Hollywood and it's like, writers are below anybody, like the guys that clean the toilets out. It's just, I'm exaggerating a tiny bit, but it really is like, directors, actors, crafty, gaffers, and then the writers like down here somewhere. Because, Hollywood, there's definitely, again, it's that perception of what Hollywood's about. And, there came the time when the auteur filmmakers started wanting to have their names over everything. So it was like a film by Alfred Hitchcock. So it's also like, oh, it's Alfred Hitchcock's movie. The writer, it doesn't matter about them. And then it was, we have this cult of celebrity too, where it's like we idolize celebrities. So then it's like directors and the celebrities kind of became the focal point of everything. And the writers kind of got very lost in the shuffle. And then, but when you get in TV, because you have to crank out the work, and they realize that it's the writers that are actually cranking out the work, and then the directors are hired on and the cast is hired on, but whoever creates the show is usually also an executive producer on it. It has like creative control, so that's why you see a lot of people moving again into television as well, is because it's they just treat writers better. It's just the bottom line, and there's just a level of respect, and it's not even about ego, like you want to be like worshipped. It's just sometimes it really literally is about just respect. Like I had a friend of mine I was talking to today, and they had a cast and crew screening of the movie he wrote and didn't invite him.
Oh, no.
Invited everybody else.
Oh.
Everybody else. And and that's just kind of typical. That's just typical of Hollywood. And it stings when because again, it's so hard to get a movie made, and then you write something, and because of politics or whatever, it's like they just don't invite the writer, and it's like, so it's that's not the only reason to get into TV. There's also something really gratifying about writing something and it comes out like a month later and you can watch it. Whereas in movies, God, you can write something and it never gets made. It gets made 10 years from now, 15 years from now. It's gone through 20 other writers. So by the time it ends up on the screen, you don't even see anything that you wrote left in the movie. So there is something very gratifying about TV because the turnaround is so much quicker from when you finish a script to when it comes out. But yeah, there is just the way they treat writers in TVs is much cooler, much more appropriate than they do in a feature world a lot of times.
How many attempts have you made to break into television?
Yeah, I think maybe 3 really, because the 2 scripts that I have now, we kind of gone out with them at the same time, and it hasn't really been a concerted effort. It's more like if I get an idea that I feel is better suited for television, I'll do it. But like there was a time that I had a project with a really big producer, and it was our project and another project that she was focused on. The other project like got picked up first and just took off, and so then all of a sudden it's like, well, we can't really focus on 2 at the time. So it's like you get a little bit like
yeah. But
then you just keep going, and then you but again, my focus is on features, but I definitely am interested in the TV world too, because I just like how now there's so many different ways you can write 6-episode like event miniseries now, or you can write anthologies like American Horror Story. You can write a 22 there's so many different ways that you can write, so there's different kind of stories you can tell. So I'm just interested in exploring that world too, and kind of creating something that's a little bit more, because I grew up watching TV all the time too, so it would be cool to have something on TV as well.
When you finish a screenplay, what do you do?
Oh, that's a good question. I usually take a nap. Really, okay. Seriously. No, I do. I don't go out and do anything crazy like celebrate. I get very happy, and I'm like, yes, and I send it off, and I usually go take a nap, because especially when I'm in that last stretch where something is either due or I'm almost done, that's when I start getting a little like super anal, where I'm going back through everything and I'm paginating the pages. And one of the tricks I learned is like, to try to have the last line on a page be something where they have literally make it a page turner, where they have to turn the page to see what the next page is going to be. Like, that was a trick I learned from a friend of mine. And so I try to go through and make sure, like, unless it's the very end of a really great scene, that it, like, every end of every page is something where you have to flip the page to at least finish it. Because if you get them over the next page, they're probably going to keep reading. It's like if you stop them at the end of a page with something like blah, they may not turn the next page. So, I do all those, like, after I've worked on the script itself, then I do those like little, like, mind gamey things to like make sure it's a page turner. So by the time I'm ready to send it off, then I have to go back through it one more time, and I have, then I take a nap because I've wore myself out.
Also, too, is it a sense of accomplishment where
Yeah.
you feel like, okay, I can rest now?
Yeah.
'Cause I'm sure, like, up until a certain deadline, it might be a lot of sleepless nights, or maybe not, just
It's
because you're
sleepless
working.
nights and it's stress, but yeah, no, when I finish something, there is definitely a sense of accomplishment where you're like, yes, especially if you know it's good. If you're not sure, then it's kind of like send with your fingers crossed. But I'm still gonna go take a nap. But then it's like, but yeah, when you feel like you really nailed it, it's good. But that's, again, the interesting about the business is you can do a script that you're 100% confident in, and your producer loved it, and then but one person at the studio reads it and it's like meh, and then you're like, ugh. So again, it's a roller coaster, right? It's really, that's why, again, I'm very big on people like doing their own content and trying to do your own content, because that's, if you really want to ensure something gets made done the way you write it, that's the best way to do it. But yeah, it's very, very gratifying when you type the end and you mean it and you can hit send to whoever you have to turn the script over to. So you definitely feel like, good job.
So if you're not a writer for hire for something, it's your own, like, passion project, and you finish it, then what's your process?
Then I usually try to, then I'll send it to, my agent or manager to look at, and then, figure out like what places to send it to. Or now what I've started doing, really, because again, I'm getting more into like producing my own stuff, is, connecting with some people that I think have access to invest, get into more of the business side of it. Like, okay, well, this might be good for this company and these companies, so let's try to, attach somebody, or let's try to, now I've gotten more business minded in the last couple of years, especially because, again, it's really, I'd love to someday be at the point where I'm running my own company, where I have like assistants that can read a bunch of scripts too, and like we can make a whole bunch of movies. But right now it's like, I have some good stories that I want to tell, and so I'm like, all right, I got to maximize the chance to get those made. So that means if it's something that I've written on my own, a lot of times now I'm going out and looking for independent financing as opposed to trying to get it set up somewhere. So that's been a fun, like, learning experience in the last year or so.